Students were at like a revolutionary breaking point. I remember some poll that said 1 million college students self-described themselves as revolutionaries.
It wasn't just the United States, it was international. Students in Germany, France, Japan, Ireland, China, Mexico had all taken to the streets, demanding everything: student power, an end to the war in Vietnam, or simply more freedom.
We were hearing by 1968 in this country, over and over, we were hearing an analysis that we were a generation of spoiled kids, that we were Dr. Spock's kids, that permissive child raising, which actually I never experienced in my own life, but was the source of the movement. Well, that couldn't have been true in Germany. It was not true in Italy. I mean, or not true in Japan. You know, and the fact that it was international, I think, completely refutes that very simplistic psychological argument which we heard all the time.
Everything that happened overseas fueled the sense that we were on the cusp of some momentous change in the history of the world.
The Columbia strike may have reminded people of the Paris Commune, but May '68 in France was the real thing. What began as a student protest for reform of the archaic, authoritarian French university system sparked a general strike that electrified the country.
They were anarchists, most of them. That was the spirit. The slogan was all power to the imagination, that you can do anything, you know, that we don't have to live with all the various forms of repression which we're used to. So it was anti-capitalist, but that was just part of this general, complete sort of cultural revolution that the French students were anticipating. And so it's interesting that although they were the furthest out in any way politically, that was also the one place where workers joined with students and almost toppled the government.
May 10th, the night of the barricades, 20,000 students marched in the Latin Quarter. Police and students clashed, street fighting went on for weeks. The rioting and marches of up to 500,000 people frightened not only President de Gaulle, but the French Communist Party as well. The old left thought this new left was out of control. They had impossible dreams.
The two principal slogans, I think, were quotations from Marx and Rimbaud. From Marx, let us change the world. From Rimbaud, let us change life.
Carlos Fuentes, the Mexican novelist, was an active participant in May '68, along with many international students caught up in the excitement.
What there was a sense of extraordinary brotherhood and sisterhood. There was this capacity to embrace people in the streets. There were couples kissing. There were couples that fell apart because they did not share political views. Paris was divided by the River Seine as never before. On the left bank, you had the left, the revolutionaries, the dreamers. On the right side, you had the conservatives, you had the Gaullists, you had the financiers, the money people, the bourgeoisie. So the city was divided as much as in Les Misérables in Victor Hugo or in any of the great occasions of this city that seems to need a great revolutionary explosion from time to time.
Eventually, the May uprising subsided. The powerful trade unions controlled by the communists refused to take part, and police kept up relentless pressure. But over time, the students did succeed in reforming and modernizing the French educational system, and they rejuvenated the Socialist Party, which a decade later became the elected government of France.
It became a great, gigantic fraternal feast in which everybody was kissing everybody, embracing everybody, patting everybody on the back, and saying how happy they were and how free they felt. And this was contagious. It was marvelous, and I don't think we'll ever see it again.
By late spring, the presidential primaries were in full swing. Eugene McCarthy was more popular than ever with college students, like the thousands who cheered him at Berkeley.
Tumultuous welcome. I think there are really three agencies of government that need to be somewhat altered. One is the Central Intelligence Agency, The second is the FBI, and the third are the draft boards under General Hershey.
McCarthy's supporters were suspicious of Robert Kennedy, who they regarded as an opportunist. But it was also clear that Kennedy was a more charismatic campaigner and was appealing to a broader coalition, not just students, but blue-collar workers, women, blacks, the poor. Kennedy himself was undergoing a dramatic political transformation. The man who was known as Ruthless, who had been a hawk on Vietnam, was now calling for peace and becoming an advocate for the dispossessed.
I think one thing that happened to him was that his brother was murdered. And I think that had a profound impact on him. I remember once he, on an airplane during the campaign, someone asked him, what's your position on the capital punishment? Some issue had come up. And he said, I'm against it. And whoever it was said to him, well, when you were at the Justice Department, that wasn't your position, when you were Attorney General. And he said, well, then I hadn't read Camus. Well, what politician, first of all, reads Camus, and second, uses it as a reason for having changed a position?
Albert Camus, the French existentialist, had written about the rebel spirit. And the Kennedy campaign, though run by professionals, began to take on an anti-establishment character. In California, Kennedy made common cause with Cesar Chavez and his new Farm Workers Union.
I share that more romantic version of the Kennedy story. But again, it's one of those stories in which we project our own fantasies and our own hopes.
The California primary was the showdown between Kennedy and McCarthy, the two candidates calling for radical change within the system, the two rebel spirits. On June 4th, it was Kennedy who emerged victorious. It was after midnight. The ballroom at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles was jammed, the heat stifling. But Kennedy was at his best.
What I think is quite clear is that we can work together in the last analysis, and that what has been going on within the United States over the period of the last 3 years, the divisions, the violence, the disenchantment with our society, the divisions whether it's between blacks and whites, between the poor and the more affluent, or between age groups, or on the war in Vietnam, that we can start to work together. We are a great country, and a selfish country, and a compassionate country. And I intend to make that my basis for running and over the period of the next few months.
The anti-war movement, the reformers, now had a presidential candidate who might actually win.
The country wants to move in a different direction. We want to deal with our own problems within our own country, and we want peace in Vietnam.
The minute he finished, I turned and walked through this pantry area on my way to where the press conference would be held, and Kennedy was right behind me. And I heard the shots ring out, and I turned, and he was already down and bleeding badly, and the place went crazy. It was an absolute scene of bedlam. And after the whole scene was over and Kennedy was removed, a number of my colleagues, including a couple of burly photographers, broke down, put their heads down on this serving table and wept openly.
An extraordinary thing happened when Kennedy's body was transported by train to Washington for burial at Arlington National Cemetery. Thousands of people spontaneously appeared along the tracks in silent tribute.